Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spurs Up. I'm Nick Klos. Alongside me is Tom Santaniello. As today we are discussing the SEC Women's Soccer Tournament, as well as Gamecock football's upcoming game against Ole Miss, as well as everything Gamecock sports. To get us started talking about women's soccer, 4 Gamecocks named to the All-SEC teams. Anna Patton going first team, Jalissa Harris also first team, Lauren Chang second team, and then Catherine Berry coming up with all freshman honors. They've just lost their last game of the season to Tennessee. Tom, why don't you tell us a bit of how they played?
I mean, it was a typical South Carolina performance. The defense looked great. They gave up that one goal, but in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that many. It's just that they didn't capitalize like they normally did. You mentioned Catherine Berry, an all-freshman SEC performer. In the beginning of the season, she was on fire, scoring goal after goal after goal. And the Gamecocks outshot Tennessee. They had a couple go off the crossbar. They had one that really just went off the crossbar, and if it dropped down another inch in their direction, that's a tie match there in Knoxville. But it just wasn't in the cards that game.
Yeah, it seems like the Gamecocks almost outplayed, as you said, very defensive game. Only 11 shots for the Gamecocks, 8 only for Tennessee, one of them going in. Obviously a game of luck there, but now Gamecocks need to transition into going into the SEC tournament. They are the 4 seed going into that. How do you think they're feeling going into the SEC tournament?
Well, obviously they're the reigning SEC champions, so I think they have to go in there with a little bit of confidence, especially because they're returning so much talent from last year. So they have people that have been around the block a few times, and they know what it takes to win a conference title. I think that they should also feel confident considering that Tennessee lost. Tennessee's the 2 seed, and that game could have went either way. So they got to feel good if there's some of those teams ahead of them they've already beaten. The 4 seed, you always feel good. They have that double bye. They're kicking off on Tuesday against the winner of a couple matches. It looks like it'll probably be Missouri if the seeding holds. But in general, Shelley Smith always has her team ready to go, especially in the postseason. So if you're a South Carolina Gamecock fan, I think you'll feel really good headed in this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. Just to break it down a little bit, the Gamecocks will play the winner of the first round, Kentucky-Florida. They will go on to play Missouri, and the winner of that game will then play the Gamecocks in the quarterfinals. So getting 2-round bye there, getting the 4 seed. So we will be excited to see how that one plays out. Now going into volleyball, we had some exciting things happen with that. Why don't you tell us a bit about that, Tom?
Yeah, so South Carolina volleyball wrapped up their season yesterday. Of course, a lot of these fall sports, I shouldn't say with the exception of football, even football shortened seasons this year due to the COVID pandemic. But the volleyball team upset the 4th-ranked Florida Gators yesterday, the first time knocking off Florida since 2006, snapping a 23-match losing streak. Just really impressive what Tom Mendoza's been able to do. He's now in year 3 here at South Carolina, so it looks like the program's definitely headed in the right direction.
Well, fantastic for them going 5-3 this year. Obviously not the best not having to get a full season. They're probably missing out on that, but glad they were able to play and end the season on definitely a high note. But now getting into arguably maybe one of the most important things on campus every week is our upcoming football game against Ole Miss, and very poor performance last week.
That's putting it nicely.
Putting it very, very nicely. Honestly, you can't even put it on one person. The defense, Colin Hill, Harris, didn't have the games we've been seeing from him. Still top 3 in rushing
Parker White
in the SEC.
Struggle.
Parker White going 1 for 2. So just Tom, try and maybe get a positive spin for the Gamecocks coming into this weekend.
Well, they're not playing Texas A&M again.
Fantastic.
So that's a positive. But I think the one real positive is that going into last week, Kevin Harris was second in the conference in rushing. So last week was more of an anomaly. Only 39 yards, and 28 of them came on 1 rush. So clearly that's just not a typical performance. The line didn't look great, but A&M always has a strong front 7, and they showed that last week. Colin Hill holds on to the ball a little bit too long, which I think puts some pressure on the rest of the offense. Jalen Brooks, the most obvious statement of 2020, he'd be great if he could just catch the ball. Gets open all the time, always open for that deep shot. He just can't hang on to the ball.
Yeah.
I'm really excited with him. They thought he was going to be a nice complement piece to Shi Smith. Nick Muse looked like he was starting to emerge, but the pieces on offense have just been floundering the past couple weeks, and it's been, with the exception of Kevin Harris, who, as usual, had a great game against LSU. Obviously, he had that bad game last week, but it's been difficult to watch offensively, and that Mike Bobo hire is just looking worse and worse as the season goes on. I don't even know how much you can put that on him. I think the scheme's okay, just guys aren't executing.
Exactly, yeah, and Muschamp even said, like you said, it's a good thing we're not playing Texas A&M. Muschamp did say in his post-game press conference that A&M was probably the best all-around team that the Gamecocks have seen all season, so obviously tough competition, but definitely they did not play up to what they what they could and have in the past. So now the really heated question is Muschamp in the hot seat. Is it a question of if Muschamp will be fired and we will get to see a new coach here in South Carolina, or when is he going to be fired?
Well, I think the question of if Muschamp's on the hot seat, that's not a question anymore. Muschamp's seat has to be on fire right now. I think you've seen it. There's a chance to fire Muschamp in the stands last week. Fans want to change. So I think that his seat has been scorching ever since last year. The Auburn win could have bought him another year, I think, but then the two bad performances against LSU and A&M. I think that if they get blown out again this week, I think that they cut ties with Muschamp. And, I think that'd just be disappointing because you heard the way the players talked about him this week in their press conferences. They all love him. It's very obvious. As Nick Musa said, he'd take a bullet for Will Muschamp. He hopes it never comes to that.
Yeah.
But, he said he would do that for his coach. And the players obviously love playing for him. Even if you go back to Florida, the guys love him. He's a great character builder. He's a great program builder. He's just not getting it done in the win column.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows Muschamp as a skilled recruiter, very skilled personably with his players, always has a very close connection. So obviously his players want to play for him, and that's a very good thing. But at the same time, the Gamecocks need to see results. So we will see how that goes definitely in the coming week. And the game Ole Miss is honestly if Muschamp can keep his job at this point. And then earlier today, we had some breaking news that Colin Hill will actually be the starter against Ole Miss. So after Ryan Hilinski came in for a little bit, we saw Luke Doty as well. Hilinski went 4 for 6 for 39 yards late in the game. So he had a decent performance. Surprised he didn't get more reps, especially with Colin Hill throwing 2 interceptions, both just bad interceptions into double coverage. So what do you think of this decision to start Hill?
I think it's hard for anyone outside the program to know what it's like in practice, especially in these COVID times where you don't have access to practice footage or anything like that. I want to give that team the benefit of the doubt. Hill is obviously very familiar with Mike Bobo's offense. Ryan Hilinski's talked about it, how in the beginning of the season he just wasn't comfortable enough with that offense. So, it's up until this point I've understood why Colin Hill's been a starter. And even the first 3 or 4 weeks, Colin Hill hasn't looked bad. It's really the LSU and the Texas A&M game where people started to raise their eyebrows. I think that up until the past 2 weeks, he's been a great game manager. He's taking care of the ball for the most part. He's taken a few ill-advised sacks and stuff like that. But overall, Colin Hill was pretty impressive considering some of the quarterback play we've seen here at South Carolina during the Will Muschamp era. But I think that the question isn't should Hill be starting. I think it should be how short is his leash going to be. You saw Luke Doty get a couple snaps last week, and then Hilinski obviously performed well in garbage time against A&M's backups. Ole Miss, you could argue, they're a bunch of backups anyway. They probably wouldn't be starting a lot of SEC schools on defense. But I think that if Hill struggles early, I don't see him getting more than 2 or 3 drives.
Yeah, and then Hill last week, as I said earlier, just 2 picks, only going 8 for 21 with 66 yards. But as you said, it seemed that since the LSU game and the A&M game, the first 3 games were solid. He put the Gamecocks where they needed to be to win games, which was what they needed out of their quarterback play this season. But it seems since LSU, it's just gone downhill for him and our defense. So what do you think's been happening that's just kind of you've seen a deterioration going on in the season?
Well, I think part of it was that going into the season, I think that Tennessee and Auburn were both overrated. So I think that our performances against both of those teams probably not as good. They probably don't look as good now as it did at the time. I think that Texas A&M was severely underrated, and I've still been trying to figure out what happened in that LSU game. With a true freshman making his first start, there's really nothing you can point to. South Carolina just was unprepared. Muschamp didn't have him ready to go. I think that if you look over the past couple games, South Carolina, they've been getting blown out, and I think that the LSU game was obviously a great example of that. But you can't put to one why. Whether it was on offense, defense, I think Parker White went 1 for 4, something like that kicking. They just did not look good in any phase of the game, and I wish there was something you could point to, whether it's coaching, whether it's attitude. Maybe it was a big win hangover, but South Carolina does not look ready for one of their biggest games. So I think if they win that game, there's a lot of momentum. You could argue they might have even been ranked going into that A&M game. Definitely,
that was definitely the case. Looking at it, you've also seen We've seen in the press conference, Muschamp always says that it is not an effort thing. His teams and his players are always giving 110%. But like you said, you can't really you'd have to be blind to not notice that something is definitely lacking in these guys going into these past 2 games. Hopefully they can turn that around against Ole Miss on Saturday. So Ole Miss Saturday is 7:30 on SEC Network. We're excited to hopefully see the Gamecocks turn it around against the Rebels. And that is all we have for today. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, South Carolina, Spurs up.